Yeah, I mean, I think that's his biggest strong suit is theater. He knows how to make a spectacle of everything, and you can see that in the LA protests, and you can see that with this parade. He likes to show that the military is on his side, like they are behind him. Just recently at his speech in Fort Bragg, he had the military lined up behind him, and he requested that only fit soldiers be behind him and those that agree with him ideologically. So he didn't want soldiers in the back shaking their heads or rolling their eyes at him. So he wanted, he wants to be presented a certain way, which is that the military is behind him and they support him. And that's why he's kind of combined this military parade, because it was his idea to do this parade with his birthday as well, to make it all about him and how he has the military support.
I mean, what I thought was incredible about that Fort Bragg speech was, number one, he said very little, but I did examine the audience. I examined those in the military that were there, that were chosen. And they were not what typically Trump rallies look like. And yes, while they were all Army, they were a very diverse group. And I sat there and I wanted to see specifically the reactions to those who were Black or brown, foreigners, those that looked like they were of Hispanic origin. And they too were cheering for the idiocy that Trump was spewing. And I thought that was incredibly telling.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all by design, right? He loves when people are showing their support for him. That's what he asked for. That's what he wanted. And they said those who disagreed with the administration should not attend this speech, or they should not at least be standing behind the president. And then he also loves when people of different ethnicities are behind him and showing their support, because it proves to him, at least, or to his supporters, that they're not racist and they love everybody and everybody is part of this movement. And so, yeah, it's all by design, of course.
Yeah, I mean, that's for sure. So look, when Trump warned that protesters at his parade, or should I say his birthday party, would be met with force, how do you think that rhetoric reflects in terms of a dangerous authoritarian impulse in our democracy? I mean, where's the line between law enforcement and political intimidation?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's terrifying what he said. He made no exception for peaceful protesters. And I don't think he, quite frankly, cares, because in his eyes, protesters who are protesting against him or his administration should be prosecuted. They should be arrested. He doesn't care if they're peaceful or not. To him, everybody is an agitator or a rioter. And so that's terrifying, because there's going to be a lot of protests around the country. But at the same time, we can't let him stop us from doing what we need to do. And we can't let him scare us from showing our dissent and going out there and protesting. So I feel like part of it is a scare tactic, but also he does what he says he's going to do. And we've seen that in LA. And we just saw that with Senator Alex Padilla getting tackled to the ground, and this is a sitting U.S. senator. If they're going to do that to him and they're going to do that on camera, they're going to do that to anybody. So it is terrifying.
Well, look, let's not forget, I mean, I've written not one, but two New York Times bestsellers on this exact issue. I talked about when I was the first political prisoner ever held by this country under the first Trump administration, not just handcuffed, but handcuffed and shackled, placed into a freezer for over 3 hours, a room that was just ice cold, no blankets, no nothing, just torture, which of course is designed. And we're going to get to Alex Padilla, but I've been yelling this from the rooftops, and shit, if I haven't fucking been right, well, here I am again, telling you what I never wanted to see happen to anybody again is now happening to teachers, to professors, to students, to judges, to sitting senators. And this is truly a dangerous time.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, like judges are not being held to a higher standard. We saw that as well. Sitting lawmakers are not. I don't think anybody really is. Even citizens are getting arrested and detained because they look like people who might not be citizens, so they look like immigrants. So it is a really terrifying time. It feels like, especially if you're ideologically opposed to this administration, they're definitely not going to spare you. And that is reminiscent of a fascist government of Russia or North Korea. That's definitely not America.
No, it's not. Meanwhile, I'll tell you what else isn't America: military on U.S. soil. I mean, the deployment of active military forces on U.S. soil under Trump, under his command, it really has historical echoes that we legitimately have not seen since the darkest moments in U.S. history. What is, in your opinion, what's the legal and the constitutional implications here?
Yeah, I mean, I think constitutionally it's abhorrent. It goes against everything that we stand for, which is the right to protest, right to free speech. And I think it's also, he's going against the own governor of the state of California, which typically they work in conjunction to determine when, federal law enforcement or the National Guard is needed to come in. And he's overriding that. And not only does that not help the situation, it makes it worse because it agitates the crowd when you come in with tear gas and with rubber bullets and you're arresting people and you're being physically violent. People might be terrified. I would be terrified. And so, yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of issues. There's going to be a lot of lawsuits, court cases afterwards of people who have been unlawfully detained or unlawfully deported. And we already saw that they have deported people who should not be deported, like Kilmar Abrego Garcia. So that's going to keep happening. And it's unfortunate because it shouldn't be happening in the first place, but hopefully we can rectify all the terrible things and the unlawful things that this administration is doing.
I'm always blown away. Just because somebody gives you an order doesn't mean that you have to fulfill it, especially if you, one, fundamentally disagree with that order, and more importantly, you fundamentally disagree with an illegal or an unconstitutional order. You see, I get it. Marines, National Guard, ICE. You don't swear an oath to Donald Trump. You don't swear an oath to MAGA. You swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States. You swear an oath to the Marines or to the National Guard, to the military, not to the individual. So if they turn around and they said, any of these protesters, just shoot on sight, I really wonder now whether or not there are more than a handful that are willing to actually go that extra mile. As they say, let's just call it payback for the, what was her name? Babbitt, right? Ashley Babbitt, that this is payback for taking the life of Ashley Babbitt. You do it to us, we do it to you. The only difference is that they're wearing a uniform, that they're given that firearm by the United States within which to protect our values. When I watched as a National Guard soldier open fire on an Australian journalist that was standing there, and she's literally looking into the microphone and the camera, and she's reporting it, all of a sudden, you literally see him. He's at the top left corner. For no reason whatsoever, you see him turn, you see him point that firearm at her and shoot her in the thigh. And I could, to this day, I have not been able to get from anybody, no one, a valid or a rational explanation as to what prompted this guy to go ahead and do it. What if hypothetically the order was to use deadly force? Would they do it against other U.S. citizens?
Right. It's a really terrifying and necessary question to ask because we don't know. It seems like they indiscriminately shoot at people when you see something like that happen to a reporter, or you see a CNN reporter getting kicked out of an area forcefully. It feels like there really is no place where they won't go. And to see that happen to our own citizens as well, to see the military turned against its own citizens in that way is scary. I saw a movie called Civil War, and it kind of is reminiscent of that. Yeah, it gives me the same feeling, same vibes as that movie. And to see that come to life is scary, and you don't know where these officers land politically. And we're in an environment where they could be completely far gone, far right extremists, and we don't know. We don't know what they believe. We don't know how much they agree with the president, how much they feel like they work for the president, and how far they'd be willing to go. We simply just don't know, and that's kind of representative of like the period of time that we're in. And I don't think that's something that this country has really seen before.
You know, I've used that example of the movie Civil War, but I always couple it with another movie called The Purge. And I don't know if you've seen the movie The Purge, to those of my listeners that haven't. It's a movie where once a year, in order to purge certain individuals from our society, they allow the hunting of other human beings, of other individuals, based upon, I don't know, a certain group of criteria. So if you take the movie Civil War and you smash it with The Purge, it's almost like, I think, what we're experiencing and witnessing, the potential, at least, of what could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen, I think there's like 3 or 4 purges, and one of them was like the purge election year. So they were targeting elected officials, and it's like that's hitting a little bit too close to home, where it's like this dystopian society. And I think Donald Trump even tweeted on Truth Social like last year or 2 years ago about maybe we need a purge, and I was like, oh my god, here we go. So yeah completely. Both those movies are.
Well, look, you know, in order to try to control his, or I should say, his enablers, like the Stephen Millers, like the Steve Bannons, to curb them, they're bringing, of course, various legal actions against him. Now, one in particular, Trump lost in the lower court, and that, of course, is regarding the National Guard deployment to LA. But then he got a temporary stay on appeal, to which, of course, his acolytes, his enablers, they go straight to that Fox, Newsmax, OAN ecosphere, and they declare it as a win. Ali, how are these court battles used as political tools rather than actual legal victories?
Yeah, I'm sure other people feel the same way as me, but it feels like it just falls on which judge receives the case and if that judge is aligned ideologically with this administration or not. That's how it feels sometimes, where it's like, okay, like clearly this is the right legal ruling. Oh, wait, hold on. Now there's a stay on this, or there's an appeals court who is putting a stop to this. So it's frustrating. I'm not a legal expert, so I don't know, the specifics, but it feels like the back and forth is not helpful. And it feels like it's more driven by politics versus the law.
Yeah, look, let me sort of run my listeners, through this. This is not a win. All right. The fact that you got the appellate court to grant a temporary stay so that an issue, and it's an important issue, which is the power of the presidency, is looked at and determined. I'll call it a victory when that appellate court comes back. I think it's in a couple of days, and there's going to be a hearing on the issue. So this is not a temporary stay or a stay, a permanent stay. This is a temporary stay. And again, it's based upon this issue that the president has certain powers and the courts should not be interfering. However, the court's sole role as a co-equal branch, right, pursuant to the Constitution, is to do exactly this. It's to ensure that no one branch, it's the checks and balances, goes ahead and that they usurp their authority over the other. And I, too, have no idea how it will ultimately play out. But for the moment, it's amazing how they just go running straight to their ecosystem, declaring, another win. It's another win for Trump, another win for the president, and for, our side of protecting America, protecting all Americans, and protecting, the sanctity of life. It's really, truly, as you put, it's dystopian.
Yeah, it's the same playbook every time. Anything that affirms that their side is right or winning, they want to amplify. Like just the other day, Charlie Kirk tweeted out a poll, and it wasn't even an accurate poll, but it said Donald Trump's approval rating is up by 8 points. Like mass immigration or mass deportation is what the Americans want, and I'm like, well, what universe are you living in? Because this poll is not accurate. I did all the research; it's not. But it's like anything they see that looks like it could be something just to affirm what they already believe, they're going to share it, they're going to amplify it, and then it just keeps going like that in their ecosystem.
So, that was something that actually was discussed going back into 2016, when you would take a look at certain polls. Now, we knew in advance, as do all pollsters, especially today, unless you do some sort of a blind poll on social media, but even then, you can kind of evaluate where it's at. For example, if they put a poll out there that said, do you approve of Trump's mass deportation policy and strategy? And you did that on X, you could only imagine that 70% of those that will respond in the affirmative, that Trump should actually be even worse in terms of how they're handling this policy. Then that should they be even tougher? These people will say yes, because X is and has become this platform of right-wing hatred. Also, if I'm doing a poll and the list that we're going to be calling of, let's say it's 150 people, they're all 80% of them, 90% of them are registered Republicans. You basically have a better than likely chance that more than 50% are going to agree with this president, right? And depending upon who you end up reaching, whether they're all MAGA, you could have 100% of the people turn around and saying, right, that this is a good policy. That's why these polls are so stupid. Now, I get Charlie Kirk and the Jesse Waters of the world and the Tucker Carlsons of the world, where, or a Gutfeld, they'll just come out and say, I told you Donald Trump is favorable amongst not just Republicans, but Democrats as well. Look at this recent poll. And they have such an amazing way of trying to spin it. Then you get bullshit Barbie, Caroline Levitt, coming out there, all decked out. And she's like, President of the United States, President Trump is by far the most favorable president of any president during the first 4.5, 5 months of a presidency. And of course, it's based upon his award-winning policy of mass deportation. Now Americans are sick and tired of these criminals, these murderers, these rapists, these drug dealers, taking over our streets, destroying our schools, our hospitals, our way of life. And thanks only to President Trump and to this administration are they effectuating what should have been done by the previous administration, including other administrations before that. But only Donald Trump has the ability and the gumption within which to do it. And then people sit there and they applaud this shit. I'm lost. I really am. I'm just lost. Yeah,
it feels Orwellian. Like if they keep saying something, it will make it come true. Donald Trump is the best president we've ever had. If they said he has 100% approval rating, people would clap and be like, yeah, that sounds right. It's like we're past the point of just like truth and facts with this administration. It feels like North Korea, where, it's like they say he won 100% of the vote, Kim Jong-un. It's clearly a rigged election. So that's half their game, is speaking things into existence, and then people hear it and they believe it because they want to trust that people are telling them the truth. And that's why MAGA still stays so loyal, and why it's so hard to break out of it, because you trust that these people are telling you the truth. And they're not. They're simply not. And so, yeah, it is frustrating. But once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. That's how I feel. Once I got out, I was like, I can see how they're lying about almost everything. And they make everything out to be a much worse situation and to instill fear and that these illegal immigrants, especially with the immigration issue, these illegal immigrants are all committing crimes, and they're going to invade your communities, and they're going to steal your jobs and your housing. And then just the other day, Donald Trump was saying, a full 180 from what he said before, which is that actually, no, there are some good people out there who work in the hotel industry and they work in the farming industry, and we should leave these people alone. Clearly he got a call from his wealthy buddy saying, hey, hold on, wait a minute, we employ some of these people. And we don't want you to touch them or hurt them or deport them. And so then it's like a whole 180. Yeah. Like, we should leave these people alone. It's like, wait, hold on. You just spent the past how many years telling us that all these immigrants are demons and they all need to be forcefully removed? And so there's no basis in truth or like values or morality or true like belief of anything. It's all just about convenience and what was going to get him elected, and now what's going to help out his wealthy buddies.
Well, I just want to remind everybody that a significant portion of those that work on his golf courses, doing the landscaping and so on, as well as many who work in his hotels. They have over a dozen hotels. I'm certain that they were falling quite short of staff. And probably one of his kids came to him and said, if we end up deporting all these people, we'll have nobody to do the groundskeeping at the golf courses. We'll have nobody within which to work in housekeeping at our hotels or at our resorts. So it may not even be his wealthy buddies. It may just be his own kids.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
So let's talk about Senator Alex Padilla of California, because during a Kristi Noem press conference, Senator Padilla was handcuffed, put down onto the ground in what many are calling a political stunt. How do you think that this kind of spectacle degrades our institutions and fuels our partisan conflict? I
think it's really egregious what happened to Alex Padilla. I think anybody watching could see he identified himself. He said, I want to ask the secretary some questions. And they continue to forcefully push him, drag him, pull him, and then throw him to the ground and arrest him. So anybody watching that was like, what the hell is going on here? This is not this is not how we should be treating anybody, nevertheless, a U.S. Senator. And I think if it was Lindsey Graham who did that during the Biden administration and he was pushed to the ground and arrested, Republicans would be up in arms, absolutely, calling Biden a dictator, calling the administration fascist. But then you have Mike Johnson the other day saying that Alex Padilla should be censored. And so it's like, hold on, wait, he should be censured because he went to ask a question and he got physically assaulted. But if that were to happen to somebody else, they would be up in arms about it. So again, it's just another one of those double standard things. But I think we can all look at that video and say that should never happen.
What bothered me about that whole video was the way Kristi Noem then looks right into the camera, goes on Fox News, of course, and lies to the American people, lies to their own constituents, lies to their own party members. Oh, we had no idea who this guy was. That all of a sudden that this crazy man, who's there, is raising his voice and in lunging, the area.
Is what they said.
That? And
they said lunging at her.
Right, and lunging at her. None of that is true. In fact, he was brought into the room by Secret Service, by the FBI, and by local law enforcement. It's his area. They may be able to make that type of an argument if hypothetically Alex Padilla was from Alaska or from North Dakota, but that's his area. That is his district. That's his, this is his state. And I just find it absolutely incredulous that not only does Kristi Noem come out there and lie to the American people, but so do the Fox News reporters, people like Sean Hannity or Jesse Waters, turning around and they're trying to whitewash what happened here. This was pure intimidation. This is what I went through when I was unconstitutionally remanded. They don't care about rule of law. They don't care about the Constitution or what's right. This is all fear mongering. This is all cosplay so that you, Ali, or anybody else, in this specific case, any other senator or any other politician You open your mouth at one of our press conferences, you go ahead, you interrupt the president or any of his staff when they're speaking, and we don't give a shit who you are. We're going to put your ass down on the ground and we're going to handcuff you. And I like also how Kristi Noem turned around and said, once he stated who he was, the whole thing was over. That's not true. He stated who he was. They dragged him into the hallway. They bended and twisted his arm. By the way, I know what it feels like. Those fucking cuffs hurt. I wasn't just cuffed. I was cuffed and shackled, right? And then only after when a bunch of people started running at them and saying, hey, whoa, slow down 1 second, they showed their IDs and said, this is Senator Alex Padilla. Get those cuffs off of him. Did he ultimately? Then I really, truly appreciated the and I don't even know who the individuals were, what law enforcement agencies they worked for, telling the staffer of Alex Padilla to shut his camera off, that there's no video recording in that federal building.
Yeah, exactly. Per who? Per Kash Patel? Yeah, I mean, anyone with eyes and ears saw him say, I'm Alex Padilla. I'm Senator Alex Padilla. I would like to ask him questions. So if they're telling us not to believe what we heard or saw in that video, that's a problem, you know. We saw him do that, and then they continued to forcefully detain him. So, and on top of all that, I think the latest shtick from the Republicans is that this was all a spectacle. It was all theatrics by Alex Padilla. He wanted to be, you know, forcefully removed. This was his goal. That was not his goal. I don't think that's anybody's goal. But if we're talking about theatrics, look at Kristi Noem, okay? She's out there in her full body gear with her extensions, makeup, and nails done, parading around like she's going into homes and arresting and dragging out criminals. Like, it's all a big game to these people. They are the kings and queens of theatrics. It's like WWE over in the Republican Party. So for them to use that against us when he had no control over, he could clearly see he was trying not to be thrown to the ground with those officers. So to say that about him is just laughable.
Yeah, it is. So I want to go back to this military parade. You think that this military parade is more about Trump's ego and his desire for adulation than actually a genuine tribute to the armed forces? Because truth be told, they didn't want this type of a parade. How damaging is it to public trust as it relates to the military when we have this sort of spectacle taking place?
Yeah, I mean, very damaging. There was not supposed to be a parade. I know they had been planning this daytime celebration for a couple of years, but it was only Donald Trump that said, hey, we want to have this parade. So that's going to cost the taxpayers between $25 to $45 million.
Oh, no, more, I'm going more than that one.
More?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I say it ranges between $50 to $80 million.
Fair, yeah. In a time when they say that they want to cut expenses, I mean, clearly it's all a big farce, because it's like Doge's whole goal was to cut government programs and to lower expenses of the United States. And then at the same time, he wants to pass this $1 trillion tax bill that's going to end up costing taxpayers and increasing the national debt by $5 trillion in the next 10 years, something of that sort. So, I mean, of course, he doesn't care that he's going to spend $80 billion on a parade, or $80 million. That's up to him. And as long as it fulfills his desire, which is to look like a king and have a military behind him, he doesn't care how much it costs.
You know, imagine, I saw this great meme that was out there. It was like, cancel the parade, save Medicaid. You know?
Right.
I mean,
I'm sure there's much better uses for that money.
Isn't there much better use for the money? Because that's all that I kept hearing coming out of the Trump administration, Doge, Elon Musk, fraud, waste, and abuse. Well, okay, this isn't fraud. All right, let's be fair about that. But is this wasteful? I think it is. Right? Who the fuck needs a parade so that Trump could feel like this is Bastille Day in France, or that this is a Kim Jong-un birthday parade where, you know, he has exactly this. They have the tanks rolling down the street, him standing there in, you know, military garb. This is a guy.
Wouldn't put it past him.
Right? This is a guy who 4F'd, you know, 4 or 5 times when he was, you know, supposed to honor the draft in Vietnam, claiming bone spurs. Now, all of a sudden, he has the military saluting him in this faux parade of vanity and so on. I truly, I find it amazing. But I find so much that this administration is doing to be, what's even the right word? It's not Orwellian and it's not dystopian. It's just like completely fucked up. We just saw, right? We just saw the ouster of Terry Moran. He's the ABC journalist. And obviously, that came under pressure from the Trump administration to ABC. The concern that I have is we're not just seeing this with ABC News. We're not just seeing it with journalists. We're seeing it with lawyers, where Trump has gotten law firms to pledge $1 billion worth of free legal work to him and his administration. We start to see all forms of pressure in various different sectors of our economy simply by this administration, that where you have these companies, these law firms, they're all capitulating to Trump and his wackadoodle whims. How do you think that this exemplifies the growing threat, going back to ABC, to independent journalism under Trump's reign, when any journalist who speaks up, speaks out, asks a question or makes a statement that Trump himself doesn't like, and then they get shit canned?
Right. Well, it's a disgrace what happened to Terry Moran. I think it's also a disgrace on ABC's part. I think we see, if you watch Fox News for 5 minutes, you will see them say 10 things that are worse than that, right? They are attacking Democrats, they're attacking Biden, they're attacking Kamala Harris, calling people names. It's like, it's a joke. It feels like CNN and ABC are playing by rules that don't exist anymore. Clearly there's independent journalism is kind of out the window these days. It feels like, especially in the right-wing echo chamber and media, that they all have, they have the same talking points, and it feels like they don't care. They're spreading propaganda. Watch Newsmax and OAN, right? So it's like, why are we holding our journalists to such high standards on our side and firing them and putting them out of work and then giving these people a free pass? And on CNN, they're hiring more and more former Trump officials. It's like, it just feels so wrong and so disgraceful. And I feel like what happened to Terry should not have happened. And again, we're playing by rules that just simply don't exist anymore. Like, let the man live.
Yeah, it's true. Meanwhile, talk about more lies, right? Trump continues to tout these tariff trade deals. And now, of course, he's talking about China, that supposedly they've now come to at least some preliminary terms, and that this is some gigantic win for America. First of all, I want people to understand what goes into a trade deal. A trade deal is not as Trump describes it. It is not where he sends them a notification that from now on, there's reciprocal tariffs of 10%, and that's it. He doesn't get to play president of the United States and also dictator to every other country. They have their own presidents, prime ministers, kings, sovereigns, and so on. He doesn't get to do that. But from your perspective, Ali, how much of this is factual? How much of it is bluster, basically meant to distract the American people from our economic reality?
A lot of it is meant to distract. Tariffs clearly aren't working. It's making life more difficult, more confusing, more uncertain for all Americans and for American companies. And we're seeing those effects play out everywhere. People are just raising their prices in anticipation of his tariffs. And he's clearly not the deal maker that he tries to make himself out to be constantly. He said he would have all these deals done. He would have this deal done with Russia. And then he's saying, Vladimir, please, Vladimir, stop. Like, that's coming from a point of desperation. And then just yesterday, you saw Israel launch an attack on Iran. And that's after Trump has been trying to work out a deal with Iran, told Israel not to strike. Israel and Netanyahu told him they wanted to go ahead and attack. They felt like they needed to attack. And now Trump is trying to play like he was in the know this whole time. He's trying to act like, he knew this was going to happen and Iran saw this coming and trying to defend now a war that he didn't ever plan to happen, but he couldn't prevent it from happening. And so it's always, it's just like it's one big facade with him that he is the in control. But then again, you end up in this situation where now you have to defend actions of another country, which may inadvertently put United States into the middle of a war.
You know, it's funny because Trump, for all of his bluster, literally across the campaign, now into his second presidency, has always referred to himself as the no war president. Under a Donald J. Trump presidency, there was no war during the first 4 years. And had he been president again in 2020, that Russia never would have attacked Ukraine. Let's call bullshit. Russia, what do you call it? That Israel would never, have been attacked by Hamas. They would never have dared to do that. And on and on and on, right? He claimed that, within 24 hours that he could stop the two wars, he can have the hostages returned. He could seem to do everything almost immediately simply because he says so. Well, we're in a very strange place right now because not only is Russia still bombarding Ukraine with missiles, the war between Israel and Hamas continues. While some hostages have been released, and applaud to that, there's still many hostages, alive and dead, that are still being held by Hamas. India and Pakistan are now, their two nuclear countries, are fighting with one another. We now have Israel's attack on Iran. We'll call that a war in my estimation. And we have military boots on the ground right here, U.S. soil, in Los Angeles and in other places. Sounds to me like maybe those campaign statements, maybe those statements he's making as president are just inaccurate.
Right. It doesn't seem like he's the pro-peace president when you look at all that in totality. But that was something they kept saying over and over and over again, which is under Joe Biden, you're going to have war, you're going to have unrest. But with Donald Trump, you're going to have peace and prosperity. Well, look at what's happening now. I mean, he's not this master of global affairs. He doesn't know how to deal with a lot of these presidents, prime ministers, and dictators. He thinks he does. He thinks he's outsmarted them. But again, it proves that they keep calling his bluff, and they don't really respect him. And so, yeah, it's ironic. It's sad, but it's ironic that they kept saying Joe Biden was responsible for the war against Hamas and Israel, and then turn around and now is Donald Trump responsible for the war between Israel and Iran that's pending?
Oh, clearly no. They're already blaming it on the Biden administration. But, you nailed it, because this isn't about Trump's foreign policy. The problem is that there is none. It's a complete and total lack thereof. And I believe that it is the lack thereof that's playing into all of these developments. It's one thing to turn around and to say, I'm going to put an end to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I'm going to whisper sweet nothings into my friend Vlad's ear, and it will stop because I am the president of the United States. More importantly, I am President Donald J. Trump, right? It's another thing for Vladimir to actually give a shit. And the same thing can, hold true for Israel and Hamas, where Trump says, we're now going to take this 170 square mile piece of property called Gaza, right? Called Gaza. And we're going to turn it into a development site, right? We're going to convert it into beautiful homes on the water and so on. And what are we going to do with the Gazans, the Palestinians that are there? Well, I don't know. Jordan will take them. Egypt will take them. And why? Because I, President Donald J. Trump, say so. Well, that ain't happening either. We could talk about India, and we could talk about Pakistan, and everything that we've just been discussing. He thinks simply because he says it that there's any reality to any of this. And we all know that this is political cosplay by a group of individuals who are all, for the most part, over their skis as it relates to getting anything done.
Yeah, I mean, it's textbook level narcissism for him to think he can waltz in somewhere, yeah, say a few words, work out a deal, and then we're going to have peace. It's kind of a joke. I mean, he's not knowledgeable actually on a lot of the long-standing issues that have gone on between Russia and Ukraine, or between Israel and Gaza. He's not knowledgeable in a lot of that, and he doesn't care to know. He thinks he has, no pun intended, like the Midas touch, where he's just going to walk in and everything's going to be great. And that's just not how it works. He doesn't even take his morning briefs half the time. So it's like he truly just doesn't even have the institutional knowledge to know how to deal with some of these dynamics between foreign adversaries. And it shows.
Yeah, it really does show. Meanwhile, I want to just go and touch back again to this whole thing with Padilla, because it strikes home for me as somebody who had their First Amendment constitutional rights violated, my civil liberties violated. They violated my First, my Fourth, and my Eighth Amendment rights. And I'm freaked out when a sitting president threatens force against, I'm not even talking about a sitting senator, which is what I felt that they did, tried to stifle his First Amendment right. But he's threatening force against protesters, making the claim that any protester will be met with massive force. I'm not even sure what that means. I'm not sure what that signals about Trump's either respect for the First Amendment and civil liberties, his understanding of the First Amendment and civil liberties, or whether or not this is just part of the routine within which to dismantle our democratic republic, our constitutional democratic republic.
I think it is part of his routine and his plan to do that. He clearly doesn't respect any part of the Constitution, and definitely not free speech or right to protest or petition. And what was I going to say? Yeah, I think it's just, I mean, it's scary that he is going to, take that into his own hands. People have the right to go protest, but it's all about how it looks for him. It's the optics for him. So he doesn't care. But I also think at the end of the day, he's trying to scare people. He's trying to make news. He's trying to deter people from coming out to protest by saying, hey, and I think his exact words were, you're going to be met with heavy force and big force. And it's like, what does big force even mean? So I think a lot of it is a scare tactic. And so I encourage people to not let that scare them from going out and participating and using the First Amendment rights, but at the same time to be cautious and be prepared for what is to come.
But how can you be cautious? So look, Ali, you are well known in the circle of Democrats, right, as somebody who speaks out and speaks out vocally and sharp. Your criticisms are sharp. What if hypothetically you go to a protest? It doesn't have to be, this No Kings protest. It could be any protest. What if hypothetically you get invited to a one of these pressers, these town halls by a Republican? You ask a question, an intelligent question. Explain to me, blah, blah, blah. And they don't like the question. Next thing you know, you're going to be handcuffed and they're going to turn around and violate your First Amendment. As somebody who went through it, and more than once, it's a horrible feeling, right? To be detained, to have your hands handcuffed behind your back, to be put onto a bus, to fingerprinted, stripped out, thrown into a cell, whether you're by yourself and it's freezing, or you're with other people, that's even worse. I mean, none of this is the American dream that people wake up and say, oh yeah, today I hope I get incarcerated. What if on top of it, they don't just do it to people like yourself, people who are involved in news, journalism, and so what if they start doing it to some of the actors that are out there? Guys like a Robert De Niro, somebody who is a vocal critic of Trump. What if he shows up to one of these rallies? What if he hypothetically is on the float and he's waving an American flag, or he's putting up some sort of a sign that says, mass deport the Trump administration now, right? And they take that as offensive. That's a violation of national security, as Trump or the administration would say. And next thing you know, the float is being stopped. by military, by the National Guard, by Marines, by law enforcement, especially if it's in a red state. And next thing you know, that individual is being cuffed and taken away. What do we do?
I mean, it's a great question. I think if something like that were to happen, I think it would cause a lot of headlines. Anytime something happens to notable people, you know, it actually brings a lot more attention to the issue than it otherwise would. So maybe that would be a positive thing for us and a really negative thing for them. I don't know. But I think ultimately all we can do is know our rights and come prepared and, you know, come with face masks if you're so allowed to, and stand your ground and bring water. And if they start tear gassing, leave, you know, I think we have to be protective of ourselves. But at the same time, we don't know. This is uncharted territory where we have an administration that so clearly doesn't care about the rule of law. So, yeah, I think it's something we all have to figure out ourselves. But first and foremost, know your rights, protect yourself, but don't let them scare you from performing what is a God-given right to you, which is the freedom to protest and the freedom of speech in this country.
I think you mean what was once a God-given right, right? Not so much anymore. Look, when they turn around and they say, you know, well, it will create headlines if hypothetically they arrest somebody of notoriety. They did that to a sitting senator in his own state. I'm not sure that there's more that could be done. But Ali, thank you for your time, for your view. Any parting thoughts on what you think we should do? What more can be done?
I think we need to demand more of our elected officials. I think what Gavin Newsom has done is a mastery in addressing things head on and attacking every punch that comes his way, and not being scared to stand up for himself. When the Trump administration threatened to arrest him, he came out and said, "Come and get me. You know, try and arrest me." And I think that's the attitude that a lot of lawmakers need to have, which is, you know, see what happens, come and get me. So I think we need to demand more of our lawmakers and elected officials, and then we need to be out there, you know, spreading the word. Again, do what you can do your part. I know a lot of us feel like we're just average people, we're just citizens, right? We're private citizens, but you have the power to make your voice heard. And I think, Michael, you do that very well. And I try to do that as well too.